On March 3rd, 2017, the Nintendo Switch was released worldwide. After the Wii U's turbulent life cycle, it was critical that Nintendo got it right this time. A number of people speculated that if they were to fuck this one up, they may never do another console again, and instead would just develop games for other systems. It was imperative that they ticked all the right boxes for the Switch's launch. One of the most important things when launching a console is to have that one launch title that everyone must have. And after 5 years in development alongside the release of the Switch, we got The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. In all honesty, the days before the game came out, I wasn't as excited as you might think. I hadn't really loved the main series Zelda games since Wind Waker and the GameCube, and I felt the series had become stale over the years. That was until the night before launch. I was super excited for the Switch itself and had my pre-order in for the console, a Pro Controller, Bomberman R, and the Collector's Edition of Breath of the Wild. The night before launch, I went on to Metacritic to see if there were any early reviews up, and oh boy. The night before the game was to launch, it was boasting a critic score of 99 out of 100. I genuinely remember my jaw dropping off while I stared at my laptop in disbelief. Based on the reviews of this game, it was going to be not just good, but so damn good that it's already being considered one of the best games of all time, and it wasn't even out. At the time, I was living in Edinburgh for uni and had a lot of spare time on my hands. I played from the second I got up to the second I went to bed for days. After a few weeks, there were reports that claimed the game had sold more copies in the US than the Switch itself due to inefficient stock of the Switch at launch. Now, think about that for a second. More copies of the game had been sold than the console it ran on? Since then, the game has gone on to be the best-selling Zelda game of all time, and there's now a sequel in development as we speak for 2020 or 2021. The game's been out for a couple of years now, and most people know what this masterpiece has to offer. I wanted to start off my YouTube channel with this video because I love the game that much, and had a lot to say. I've been thinking of doing a gaming YouTube channel for a while now, and now that I have the equipment, what better game to start with? At the time I'm writing this review, I've played over 200 hours of the game across a couple of accounts, and I've 100%ed it twice with the exception of the Korok seeds, cause fuck that. This is my first video, so if you enjoy it, please help me kick off the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and all that good stuff. Anyway, welcome to my review of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Nintendo decided to shake up the Zelda formula quite a lot with this one. A lot of the series staples were scrapped or changed completely. For a start, there's no more traditional dungeons, and instead there's 120 shrines, which are basically mini dungeons full of puzzles. As well as these, you have the 4 bigger dungeons with the classic boss at the end in the form of the Divine Beasts. There's no more one standard green tunic. Nope, you can pick and choose what you're wearing as you please. Most clothes sets have certain perks that work best for different situations. For example, this set will increase my speed while I climb. This set will increase my attack when fighting enemies. This set will let me swim faster and swim up waterfalls. This set will show me enemies' HP. And others are as simple as keeping you warm in the cold or keeping you cool in the warmth. There's no more reds to pick up as health, and instead you now make food using ingredients you gather from across the land. There's pages and pages of meals that can be made by combining hundreds of different ingredients. There are now more movement options than ever. Link can jump, climb, and glide off heights, making traversal of the map incredibly fun at all times. The most important change is that the game isn't linear. Most Zelda games have you tackle a number of bosses and dungeons in a very specific order. In Breath of the Wild, it's open world, and from the second you leave the Great Plateau, you can seriously pick any direction and just do as you please. You can even waltz straight up to Hyrule Castle and try to fight the last boss straight away if you want. Oh, hi Ganon. Better watch out. I have a stick. Oh. Well. The way I found myself traversing through the game was usually a case of, ooh, what's that over there? And then when I got over there, it would be, ooh, I wonder what's up there. And this would happen over and over again across the entirety of the game. Not a second goes by where you aren't looking at something in the distance, and instantaneously, your only goal in life is to go explore it. The map is so densely packed with puzzles, unique structures, caves, mountains, and so many secrets. Just how much there is to find is why this game's world is so much fun to explore. A lot of open world games have large maps but suffer because of areas where there isn't a lot to do or see, but in Breath of the Wild they nailed it. There's always so many interesting items lying around that you're constantly gathering along the way. There's 120 shrines, which are mini-dungeon-like puzzles. These reward you with spirit orbs, which are used to increase either your health or stamina meter. Finally, let's talk about the infamous 900 Korok seeds to collect. If you don't know about these little guys, let me explain. Say you're up a mountain, and you see a circle of rocks, but one looks out of place. You pick it up, and you complete the circle, and poof! You've solved this Korok's puzzle, and are rewarded with a Korok seed. These can be used to expand your inventory later. Ooh, look, a flower. Where'd it go? Over there. Oh, what the fuck? Get over here! What is that thing? Ah. Yay! These guys are super satisfying to find, and when you find one under a rock... Each section of the map has its own tower. When climbed, you can insert your Sheikah Slate and uncover that portion of the map, similar to the mechanics of an Assassin's Creed game. From there, you would find yourself looking over everything you wanted to go see in sight, and mark it on your map, creating a tick list of things you want to do and see. The game's map is so big that there are literal climates between areas. There's a giant desert, snowy mountains, beautiful forests, lakes, beaches, a volcano, and there's so many areas in the game that genuinely had me standing and panning over the scenery and thinking, this game is fucking beautiful. Travelling around the world in this game had me feeling like I'd actually been to some of these places as well, which filled me with a real sense of adventure many games just can't match. Everyone will remember the first time they were looking through the Sheikah Slate and saw, faintly in the distance, a giant moving something. What is that? When you get a better look, you see a giant flying bird in the sky, miles away, or a giant lizard climbing around a volcano. And you can only imagine how big these things are when you get up close, or what would happen if you did. I remember vividly the first time I saw one of the 3 dragons just flying about the map. I actually froze and thought, oh shit, this thing's gonna eat me! But at the same time, I was in awe at what was in front of me. The first time playing the game, these things were just so unexpected, and it blew my mind to just stumble across them. One more thing to mention is the very start of the game. When you wake up and walk outside, you step to the edge of a cliff and the camera pans around and says, "Yep, see all this? This is your playing ground." This was an absolutely amazing way to start the game, as it's like a small promise of what you're about to experience, and a teaser as to what the scope of the map you have to explore is really going to be like. As well as 120 shrines, there are 4 bigger dungeons inside what's known as the Divine Beasts. These are 4 giant mechanical animals which act as the main dungeons in the game. These are also where you're going to find the 4 main bosses in the game before fighting Ganon. These are all very similar to one another, and is one of the game's biggest downfalls. There isn't much boss variety in comparison to other Zelda titles, and it's basically the same boss 4 times with a different element. Nothing game-ruining, but definitely forgettable. What makes exploring in this game so fun is the way you can get about. The glider is used when jumping off cliffs or anywhere there's a drop. This is super fun even after hundreds of hours of gameplay. The views on the way down are always amazing, and without even noticing it, you'll find yourself climbing up mountains or hills just to glide off. This makes great use of the verticality of the landscape without the player even noticing. In snowy areas, you can use your shield to shield surf down mountains. In the desert, you can tame a sand seal and shield surf along the sand. You can raft across waters to nearby islands, and of course, there's the classic travelling by horseback. The great thing about this game is quite literally anywhere you can see, you can go, and it's not if you can get somewhere, it's how to get there. Volcano? Check. Tippy top of that mountain? Check. Spoopy castle? Check. At the start of the game you get what's called the Sheikah Slate. This is essentially an ancient tablet that has different abilities or runes that are your main way of completing puzzles and shrines, and can also be used in the overworld in various ways. You have the round and square bombs for blowing up stuff. You have the stasis rune, where you can freeze an object in time for a few seconds, allowing you to hit it and build up force, resulting in it launching when time resumes. You have the Cryonis rune that builds a pillar of ice out of a body of water. This can be used to travel across the water, or lift objects out of the water. You have the Magnesis rune for lifting metal objects of any weight, and a camera for, well, selfies. This was a creative way to make great puzzles that have to be solved using the tools you're given, which of course is one of Zelda's biggest staples. One thing I would say though, is while the shrines were fun, they're all pretty easy, and adding some with a bit more difficulty would have been nice. Another thing I haven't talked about is the side quests. Some side quests are as simple as gathering some stuff and giving it to someone. Others are long ongoing quests. One that everyone loves is the Tarrey Town quest. This is an ongoing quest with many parts in which you gradually build an entire town with a guy by helping him recruit the right people from across the map. Other good ones include the mission where you buy and build your own house, or weird ones like locating the mythical giant horse. One thing I hope they improve upon in Breath of the Wild 2 is to have more in-depth side quests, as the grand majority in Breath of the Wild are as simple as locating a single item or gathering some mushrooms or something along those lines. Some of the better side quests are actually the shrine quests. These are basically puzzles or riddles sung to you by Cass, and as a reward you will discover a hidden shrine. I had a lot of fun trying to figure out these based on the clues you're given. Anytime I was walking across Hyrule and heard this, I knew Cass was nearby, and it was riddle time. The combat system is pretty fun, and kinda reminds me of the Dark Souls series. You have swords, shields, spears, wands, bows, and more. The lock-on system feels good with the option to jump left, right, or backflip to dodge. Alternatively, you can parry an enemy's attack with your shield. One mechanic that's super fun is when you shoot an arrow mid-air and time slows down. This allows you to line up your shots precisely before landing. You can also use some of your runes to fight. A problem a lot of people have is with the weapon durability system. A weapon will break when you've used it too much, and the idea here being to force you to use different weapons instead of the one sword and shield the whole game. I enjoyed this personally, as it forces you to get creative. I never found myself without enough weapons, as you can always pick up the enemies you defeat's weapons. One thing I will say is, and spoiler alert, I think it's bullshit that the Master Sword needs to be recharged. That feels pointless and kinda ridiculous considering what the sword is supposed to be, a god tier weapon throughout the franchise. Getting it and the Hyrule Shield is completely optional also, and the way they lock it behind your health pool to actually draw it was pretty clever. The enemies in the game are all great. You can sit and watch them go about their day, and you'll see them interact with each other and the environment. Bokoblins in particular are hilarious to sit back and watch. Lynels are super challenging and almost feel like mini-bosses. They became my favourite enemy to fight and are challenging right up until after you beat the game. Stone Taluses are also a little crazy surprise. The first time you come across one, you might even walk over the top of it. While the enemies in the game are great, there is a lack of variety, and a few more would have been nice. You'll find that about 70% of the enemies you come across the map are all bokoblins, moblins, or lizards. Maybe in Breath of the Wild 2 we'll see more enemy variety. Every time you beat one of the 4 main bosses at the end of the Divine Beasts, you gain an ability from the champion of that beast. One is basically a second life and saves you if you were to die when it's charged. One lets you create and ride a gust of air into the sky, and this helps with vertical traversal. One is an offensive strike of lightning, and one acts as a shield to deflect hits. There's even one that makes things vanish into thin air. What? Nintendo developed a physics and chemistry engine from scratch for this game. What does this mean, Ryan? When you see the wind blow the leaves on the trees, that there's actually wind which is creating a force that is moving the leaves on the trees, just like it would in real life. It's not just an animation and sound of the winds blowing and the leaves moving. When you shoot an arrow, it can stick into various materials based on its trajectory and force. Everything is calculated as if the game's world had actual physics, the same way it would work in real life. When you light a patch of grass on fire, the fire actually spreads from one blade of grass to the next. As a result, this can cause an updraft of air, again just like it would in real life, as hot air rises. This attention to detail makes the game's world feel real, and subconsciously you know what to expect from different scenarios. The desert during the day is very hot, but the desert during the night is freezing. You go up high altitudes and it gets colder. Up on a snowy mountain, it'll be freezing. What can I do? Well, put on some warm clothes, or carry a source of fire. Smart. If it's raining and you shoot a bomb arrow, it ain't gonna explode. You pull out a bomb arrow in extreme heat, like on the side of a volcano, well, it's gonna blow up on you. Last thing to say about the game's world is that it's jam-packed with Easter eggs from other Zelda games. One example is the name of many locations on the map. Others are outright places that we are familiar with from other titles. Recognize this place? Or this big boy? Or this man? The game devs took great care in adding throwbacks to nearly every other Zelda title, and every time you recognize one of these as a Zelda fan, it just has you smiling. Let's talk about story and characters. One thing a lot of people had an issue with was the lack of game story, or more so how it was told. You wake up at the start of the game and hear a voice guiding you. You later learn that you've been asleep in a restoration chamber for 100 years while Zelda herself has been fighting off to hold Ganon. The king who died 100 years ago appears as a ghost and reminds you of what happened, and he asks you to save Zelda and Hyrule. Pretty standard. You've forgotten everything due to a battle 100 years ago when Ganon originally came back. He's also taken over 4 giant mechanical beasts and killed the 4 champions that used to pilot them. So you're encouraged to go and free these as well. The main issue is that most of the story is told in flashbacks to the past and not the present day. This had pretty much everyone wishing that we were playing the game 100 years ago instead of the present time where everyone's long dead. The characters in this game are incredibly likeable. You meet 4 unique champions from each of the 4 non-Hylian races, which are individuals that were selected to pilot the 4 divine beasts. Along with these 4, you meet the 4 deceased champions prior to them. You become really interested in these guys, but the huge problem I had was that you only get to interact with them for a little while before moving on. These flashbacks are amazing cinematic cutscenes of the past, back in a time where you lived with these guys. They do a great job of building up how close you all were, and the relationship you had with each of them. But as I said, most of the story is being told in flashbacks or memories to fill the gaps of what happened while you were in your coma for 100 years. And not a lot is going on in the present day in comparison. Every time you watch an amazing cutscene from the past, and then you come back to the present time where no one's left, it just feels empty. All these guys were your best friends, and not a single one of them's alive. Imagine remembering all the relationships you had with these guys, but no more talking to them, or no more seeing them except for a couple of lines of dialogue and memories. It especially sucked to know that one of the characters, Mipha, was Link's love interest, and they probably would have been together if she hadn't died.
Perhaps we could spend some time together.
Big F. You go on to optionally defeat the Calamity Ganons in the 4 Divine Beasts before heading to Hyrule Castle to beat Ganon himself. One thing that really annoys me still is that even after you beat the game, Ganon is still in Hyrule Castle, as if you've never fought him. There is no post-game, which is quite disappointing. There is, however, an alternate ending if you collect all the memories before beating Ganon, which is slightly better than the normal one. Overall, the story is good, but the way it's told is so sad. As I said, you want to be back 100 years ago, experiencing all this with the 4 champions that are now dead. Again, everything's optional, so if you don't care about the story at all, you really don't have to see much of it. Alternatively, if you do care, you can hunt out books, talk to NPCs, and collect all the memories to flesh out the story and the lore of the world. The cel-shaded graphics create this colourful and vibrant world that feels nearly painted. I cannot emphasise enough how many times I stopped to just stare out over the landscape from atop a mountain and watch the day and night cycle go by. The redesign of Link, Zelda, and the 4 non-human races were also perfectly done. Each race really seems to fit in the world they live in. It was a very ballsy move to change up the main character so much after all these years, and it's possibly my favourite iteration of Link out of all the games. Let's talk about the design of the main towns. Something you might not even have thought about is how realistic the towns are to their inhabitants. For example, the Rito village is all about verticality. It's built up tall. This is because the Rito can fly. If we look at the Zora's domain, it's all water based, with waterfalls flowing out into the main body of water. Zoras are water based after all, and can scale up waterfalls. Again, this makes sense. The Gorons eat rocks and love the heat, so they live around a volcano, and the Gerudo live in the desert, where the buildings are all very open. Side note, the Gerudo live in a village where it's an entire race of women. The only way that Link can get in is to sneak in, dressed as a Gerudo.
Oh, mama!
It's cool to think how much thought was put into making these towns make sense to the people who live there. This game is very unique with its music and sound design. It can be summed up in one word: ambience. The game's soundtrack is completely based on the environment you're in, and creates an ambience that fits where you are and what you're doing at any given time. The music transitions from one track to another so gradually and smoothly that you wouldn't even notice unless you were listening for it. They also managed to slip in some familiar remix tunes from other Zelda games. This adds to the ever-growing love letter this game is. Something introduced for the first time in any Zelda game was voice acting. Personally, I loved the over-the-top voice acting for the main characters and felt they really helped give them personality, especially to the champions and Zelda herself.
I think it is. Look at this.
I don't believe it, but I actually caught one. This delicacy is known to have very, very potent effects under the proper circumstances. Ta-da!
Only problem is, the voice acting is only for the cutscenes. No dialogue is spoken by NPCs at all. And this is a shame, because it could really have made the overworld feel more lively, especially in the towns. There's an endless amount of things I want to talk about, but I can't cover half of them in this video without making it any longer. The act of simply walking around in this game is full of constant rewards and surprises. Breath of the Wild reinvents the Zelda series and deserves every bit of recognition and praise it gets. With a few slight improvements in things mentioned such as longer, more detailed side quests, more in-depth story told in present tense, and slightly more enemy variety and a post-game, Breath of the Wild 2 could be even better. This game's world takes you on one hell of a journey from start to finish and is so large and vast that there's hundreds of hours of gameplay to be had. If you're a Switch owner, you owe it to yourself to play this instant classic. Honestly, do yourself a favour, and if you don't own a copy, get one. With rounding up, I give Breath of the Wild a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching my first video. It took a lot of time and effort, and although it's far from perfect, I had fun making it. I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video and became one of my first subscribers to the channel. I'm already working on my next video and can't wait to get a little community going on my channel. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.